In rate decision news, the Central Bank of Namibia today holds the country's repo rate for a second straight meeting. The Southern African Central Bank says there are concerns about the ongoing Middle East crisis, the global trade tariffs, as well as the peg of its local currency to the South African rand. Let's take a listen to the governor.
The global economy maintained a moderate pace of growth in the first quarter of 2025, with the medium-term outlook remaining under significant downward pressure. Since the previous MPC meeting, global inflation generally slowed, while key stock and bond markets remained relatively volatile. Monetary policy stances eased across most of the monitored central banks. Global growth was steady during the first quarter of 2025 relative to the fourth quarter of 2024, with divergences between individual countries having been noted. Among the monitored economies, growth slowed in the United States, United Kingdom, Brazil, and Russia. Growth remained weak in South Africa and steady in China, whereas it picked up in the euro area, Japan, and India. Global growth prospects have deteriorated since the previous MPC meeting, with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, now projecting world output growth to slow from an estimated 3.3% in 2024 to 2.8% in 2025 and 3% in 2026. Prices for most key international commodities increased since the last MPC meeting. The price of gold has continued to rally, reaching a new all-time high, most recently buoyed by safe haven demand. Crude oil futures prices have increased, mainly ascribed to the recent escalation of geopolitical conflict in the Middle East. Turning to base metals, copper futures were higher primarily due to supply disruptions, while zinc futures marginally ticked up due to tighter supply. Moreover, uranium spot prices also edged higher, supported by improved risk appetite and positive investor sentiment regarding the growing number of nuclear reactors. Diamond prices remain subdued, attributed to weaker global demand and competition from lab-grown diamonds. Since the previous MPC meeting, global stock markets initially sold off in early April 2025 before recovering subsequently. These developments largely reflected the US's announcement of reciprocal tariffs and its subsequent 90-day suspension. Pivoting to key bond markets, yields mostly fluctuated sideways, but have returned to levels observed at the previous MPC meeting, although with a downward bias in the case of South Africa. Global inflation has generally receded since the April MPC meeting, despite some cost pressures from rising tariffs. Among the monitored advanced economies, inflation moderated in the euro area and Japan, edged up in the United Kingdom, and remained stable in the United States. Furthermore, inflation slowed in most of the key emerging market and developing economies. Meanwhile, deflationary pressures persisted in China. Going forward, the IMF projects global inflation to decline from 5.7% in 2024 to 4.3% in 2025 and 3.6% in 2026. Inflation is now projected to come down at a slower pace than previously anticipated, mainly due to the potential impact of trade tariffs and the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. Since the last MPC meeting, most of the monitored central banks have reduced their policy rates, marking a deviation from the previously unchanged monetary policy stances. In the key advanced economies, the Bank of England and the European Central Bank reduced rates, while the US Federal Reserve and the Bank of Japan maintained rates steady. Among the emerging markets and developing economies, most central banks lowered their policy rates, except the Bank of Brazil, which continued to tighten. So given this background, what's the monetary policy stance that's appropriate for the next 2 months? Against this background, the MPC decided unanimously to keep the repo rate unchanged at 6.75%, a full percentage point decrease compared to a year ago.